Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to another Quran study. Uh, God willing, today we'll be reading from Surah 30, verse 22. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Okay, so Surah 30. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. More proofs. Among his proofs are the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations, your languages, and your colors. And these are signs for the knowledgeable. Among his proofs is your sleeping during the night and your working in pursuit of his provisions. In this, there are sufficient proofs for people who can hear. So we see from these verses that God is talking about his proofs that I think any person with a mind and intelligence should be able to think about and remember, because these are God signs that believers will ponder on, and this will help them remember God, obviously, right? So going back to these proofs, uh, God is telling us that this is something that we should, as believers, think about, and there are signs for the knowledgeable. The knowledgeable people will use them to get closer to God, to have more faith in God, to actually, have a strong belief in God. And the creation of the heavens and the earth and the variations in our languages, our colors. I mean, it is very interesting, really, if you think about the variations in the languages and the variations in the colors, and how God makes it all possible. Like if you really think about it, how the languages are so expressive in our ideas, emotions, and how we're able to connect with other people. It's incredible. Like imagine how it's easy for a child to grow up in an environment and to pick up on all the little nuances and all the things in the vocabulary. A child can learn so many languages because that's the way God has designed our brains to be able to have that information stored in our brain so we can understand each other. And now imagine if we all had difficulty in picking up languages. If God had designed our minds differently, we would not be able to communicate. We would not be able to learn those languages. Like, imagine how, like, for example, if you try to teach an 80-year-old a new language, you're never going to be successful, right? I mean, he's going to know, understand certain words, maybe, and forget them, a couple of days later. But we have entire language systems that are so complex, and we have so many grammatical rules, and yet people who know these languages are able to speak them fluently and express them in such detailed manner. All that is possible from God. God has allowed this whole setup to happen. God had allowed these systems, these alphabets, all these things to be formed and understood by these people so we can communicate. And if it was like, let's say, evolution, like we would all be just still using scribble, trying to communicate with each other, at the best, best case scenario, right? Or just, talking with signs and using stones or whatnot. But God has made obviously an amazing, immaculate system that is in the works, and it's beyond our understanding and our ability to comprehend, how God makes the world. But obviously, for a fact, anyone, as God says, who's knowledgeable, when they think about it, this helps them understand. Like even if you look at the variations in people's colors, and you look at how, for example, like pigmentation and things like that happen as you go up and down the equator, where there's more sun, where there's less sun, and you see all these variations. They're all for a very specific reason, for people to survive in different climates, For example, in areas where there's more sun, you see people with darker skin, people with darker, eye colors, all that for a very specific reason for them to resist, harmful radiations and stuff like that. And for people in lighter colors, having like lighter colored eyes, for example, to be able to see better, in areas where there's more darkness, or so many other reasons, right, behind what we can even imagine. And, all of these things have been designed, and you can tell that there's a purpose from seeing all these things. Like, it just doesn't. Um, there's nothing that is without purpose. God has created everything for a very specific reason, and then also, as God says, sleeping during the night for rest. Imagine if there was no sleeping, we would all go crazy in a few days, right? I mean, we'll literally go crazy. We'll start biting our flesh and killing each other for no reason, right? That's how crazy you would get, like if you don't have sleep for like 7, 8 days straight, right? And God has created it, and people don't even think about it. Like, yeah, it's evolution. No, I mean, who created this whole system of your brain getting all drained and getting all these byproducts that are stuck in your brain, that you will feel so tired at the end of the day that you can't function, and God causes all these things to be eliminated from your body flawlessly, when you just rest, reset yourself, just think about all of these things. Thinking about all of these things will help people understand that there is the creator behind this whole process. And so then God talks about, uh, he shows us the lightning as a source of fear as well as hope. It says, among his proofs is that he shows you the lightning as a source of fear as well as hope. Then he sends down from the sky water to revive a land that has been dead. And these are sufficient proof for people who understand. Among his proofs is that the heavens and the earth are standing at his disposal. Finally, when he calls you out of the earth, one call, you will immediately come out. It- To him belongs everyone in the heavens and the earth, all are subservient to him. And he's the one who initiates the creation and repeats it. This is even for him easier for him. To him belongs the most sublime similitude in the heavens and the earth, and he's the Almighty, most wise. So also, it talks about the lightning and the source of fear. We see the lightning. I mean, it's something that like surprises our senses every time we see it, and it gives you this feeling of this feeling of like um, fear, because you don't want to get struck by lightning, but also it gives you a sign of hope, that you're going to have provisions from God. I mean, he's going to revive the land that is dead, and how he sends down the water from the sky for us to, pure water for us to drink, for us to grow our plants, for us to feed our animals. And if this didn't wasn't created, then nobody could bring that for us. And also but it also shows us as a constant reminder that God is in full control of everything. Like some people would say, God created, we don't know, like God created everything, and I don't know, God bored or something, and he left. And maybe people have all sorts of crazy ideas, but we know that God is in full control and he's running everything. Everything's for a purpose. We have a specific time, we have an end date that we cannot delay. We have a end date for the earth. We have the day of judgment planned. Everything's planned, and everything is being fully washed and controlled by God. Um, and then the other proof is that, as God says, the earth, heaven and the earth are standing at his disposal. Despite all the vast number of heavenly bodies that are floating in our galaxies, across our universes, God is making it work in a way that the earth is untouched, or virtually untouched. Like no other planets are crashing into it, and no meteors are crashing into the earth, and no asteroids are hitting the earth like haphazardly, and there's no chaos in that sense. We have a a stable spaceship, I mean, you could never have a spaceship running for 100 years in space, um, supervised, that never hits anything, right? I mean, if you just leave something into space like that and expect it to be surviving for all these years without hitting any debris or anything like that in space, or any meteors or anything like that, I mean, that would be quite a task, right? And God has created this giant Earth that has been just in such a calculated manner, doing its work every single day for all these years. Obviously, is a proof from God for us to think about. And then God says, when that time comes, eventually everything's gonna come to a halt, and God says He's the one who initiates the creation and then repeats it. I mean, I mean, we talked about this before, but like, think about reproduction and how, all these cells multiply, and, you have an entire new human being. I mean, imagine like if someone was able to make an invention, like you have a computer and then the computer decided to reproduce itself with another computer, uh, or just by itself, like you have an iPhone and then all of a sudden, it multiplies and decides to become two iPhones. Like, nobody can do that, right? I mean, you can never build such a thing, right? And but God has created His design in such a way. He has created us in pairs, and He has created these systems in place that would be impossible, for anybody without a doubt, right? But yet God says, people revert to idol worship, and so this is verse 28, absurdity of idol worship. He cites for you here an example from among yourselves. Do you ever elevate your servants or subordinates to the level where they rival you, and to the point that you pay them as much allegiance as is being paid to you? We thus explain the revelations for people who understand. Indeed, the transgressors have followed their own opinions without knowledge. Who then can guide those who have been sent astray by God? No one can help them. Monotheism, natural instinct. Therefore, you shall devote yourselves to the religion of strict monotheism. Such is the natural instinct placed into the people by God. Such creation of God will never change. This is the perfect religion, but most people do not know. And the footnote says, recognizing God alone as our Lord and Master is a natural instinct. We are born into this world with such an instinct. See 7 172 to 173 and Appendix 7. And then verse 31 says, you shall submit to him, reverence him, observe the contact per salat, and whatever you do, do not ever fall into idol worship. Sectarianism, them do not fall into idol worship, like those who divide their religion into sects, each party rejoicing with what they have. So these verses are, talking about the importance and the significance of worshiping God alone, the importance of, sorry, adhering to the strict religion of monotheism, right? Because people, in spite of all of these proofs that God has shown to us, people will fall into idol worship. I mean, knowing, for example, comparing Muhammad, giving him the status that people have given next to God, or giving Jesus the status that they have given next to God. I mean, all these are absurd lies. As it says, the absurdity of this idol worship is incomprehensible, because, here you have the Lord of the heavens and the earth, who has created these vast galaxies and stars, 100 times the size of the earth or even larger. I mean, size of the sun or even larger. And all of these galaxies that we know, you can't even imagine with our brains, like how big this universe is and how big the other universes are, and then how big God would be, and then you have this, teeny tiny little speck of dust, not even, I mean, I mean, it's hard to even describe, like if you were a size comparison, like there's no comparison whatsoever with a fallible human being. And then you have given it a status next to God, where you made God even like a secretary for intercession, or God as a father, with having a son as a partner, as an ally out of some sort of weakness, that he is incapable of ruling his own dominion by himself, and this is absurd, it says absurd lies, and God has given us the example, like, would you ever, have, like, let's say, your business, and give your subordinates that you have, like, let's say, your chauffeur, your driver, or let's say your handyman or your plumber, you give him like half of the company, would you ever do that? No, and that's why, like, why would you think that, God, who created us as his servants to worship him alone, and that's all they preach their whole lives too. But now, God would, like, raise them to the level where God created the universes for them, and God will place people in heaven or hell based on what they say, you know, and uh, this, or have a son or a mate, so from humans, so why would that even enter the minds of people, like, if they were to understand the greatness of God, and that's why God has, and especially because God has even given us the natural instinct to worship Him alone. Like, we all bore witness before we came here that we're going to worship Him alone. I mean, so it's not remotely acceptable, as an excuse that people will claim innocence on the day of judgment and say they didn't know, because it's all ingrained in our minds. I mean, we can recall it in a way that we recall, past events, as part of the test. But as far as the knowledge itself, I mean, we have the inner instinct, we have the inner knowledge of this happening in front of us, which itself did not get, the instinct itself did not get erased from our memories. We still have that instinct, that as part of the advantage we have over the jinns, is we all have that instinct. That information is within us, and God doesn't make a mistake. So every human being knows that they're supposed to worship God alone. So when they're doing this idol worship, they're going against their natural instinct, and that's so evil, right? That humans are going against their instinct into, worshiping these idols. Like, I used to think, when I was, like, in the beginning. I mean, when people didn't tell me about, like, who God is, and all this religious complexities, I knew that. I mean, and everybody does, right? God, there's one God, and then later you find out, okay, there's this God, and then there's this person who's this, and then there's this saint, and then you say, okay, and because the people will teach you, or the society will tell you, or other people will mislead you into thinking things, and then you say, okay, and then you start doing other things, right? But coming natural, from the mother's belly, knowing nothing, we do come with knowledge that God is only one God, and we should not be setting up idols, right? But people end up doing it anyways, and Satan helps in that direction ultimately. But the natural instinct is always there, and that's why God says we should always devote our religion absolutely to God alone, and this is God's system that will never change. And that's why we're supposed to submit to God alone. And we're not supposed to fall into idol worship. We're not supposed to fall into idol worship, just like these sects that have divided their religion, and fallen into idol worship. Both have their own gods, and both have their own idols, and they're both satisfied, or they're all satisfied with their idols, right? So if you look at every sect in the religion that have divided themselves from submission, they are following different idols, right? Some people have idolized Ali, some have idolized the saints, some have idolized certain prophets, some have idolized certain scholars, some have idolized certain religious leaders, and they're all created their own sects, but they're not following submission. They divided their religion by idolizing other people besides God, right? So when other people divide themselves from the religion by creating certain idols, listening to certain uh, people other than God, that's wrong, right? And so the natural behavior should be to stick to God alone, and to follow the religion of strict monotheism that is inherent, within our brains, within our souls, as we bore witness, and stick to that, right? So, but also some people, like to abuse these verses, especially the one about people dividing religion into sects, each party being happy with what they have. Is it is not for submitters, right? I mean, it is different. Like, let's say, somebody decides to change their religion and they divide themselves, right? Like someone says, for example, like, I think circumcision is part of the religion because Rabbi Judah wrote this in this book and such and such, and the messenger mentioned him or whatnot, and they divide their religion, right? So at that point, you can't say no. We're all fine. We're all the same. We should all be together, because no, at that person or that group of individuals, they decided to divide their religion and form a sect. So then you can't point at the people who have decided not to do that, because they have only decide to be with the religion. You can't equate the two and say, look, it's like the sects, each sect happy with what they have. Yeah, the people who idolize are the ones that are creating sects, among the people. And for example, among the people who have followed, for example, circumcision as a practice, they are multiple groups. They're not just one group, and they have divided themselves into different sects, and they're both happy with what they have, right? But you can't say that about a group of individuals who haven't decided to do that, who strictly worship God alone and what God says and what the Quran says, and they stick to that, right? And that's what God wants everybody to be. So He wants people to be united as that. Obviously, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't divide your religion. So go and mingle with these people and go and pray with them in the same masjid and go and hold hands with them. Obviously, that's not the thing, right? Because otherwise, there's no difference between you and them. So the idea is they should not be dividing the religion. They should not be incorporating wrong practices and doing idol worship. If you think that there's anything else besides the Quran and that you can take as a source of religious law, you have just fallen into idol worship. You've just created a new sect, right? And that would apply to them. But you can't say it for people who have not done that and expect them to just follow the somehow be in the same room or same building as if they're one group. This is not even practical, right? Yeah, and we understand why. And God says, obviously, that the believers will not do that. The most evil people are those who fabricate lies about God. So if somebody's fabricating lies about God and falling into idol worship, they're not actually following submission. So I just wanted to bring that out because I've seen this particular verse being brought up and being abused in a way to justify idol worship. So verse verse 33 says, uh, um, when adversity afflicts the people, they turn to the Lord, totally devoting themselves to Him. But then, as soon as He showers them with mercy, some of them revert to idol worship. So, a common example in the footnote says is the classified advertisements we note in the newspapers placed by people thanking St. Jude for healing them. Before undergoing surgery, they sincerely implore God to heal them. But then, as soon as the surgery succeeds, they thank St. Jude. Let them be unappreciative of what we have given them. Enjoy it temporarily. You will surely find out. Have we given them authorization that justifies their idolatry? When we bestow mercy upon the people, they rejoice therein. But when adversity befalls them as a consequence of their own works, they become despondent. So these are examples of people that God talks about. There's fair weather friends, and then there's bad weather friends, right? And that's why we have the admissions test to distinguish between people who will just be fair weather friends or people who will just be bad weather friends versus the submitters who will be friends, uh, under all circumstances, who will be worshiping God alone under all circumstances. So a lot of people will, turn to God when things are going their way, when things are going good, and they're thanking God, they're worshiping God. And then other people are the exact opposite, where they will only worship God when they're in trouble, right? So when some disaster comes upon them, some really bad times come upon them, like if they're drowning or something really bad situation, they'll implore God a lot, they'll turn to God, they'll start doing their prayers, they'll give to charity, they'll do all these things. And then as soon as, things get better, they go back to their old ways and they go back to idol worship. And then there's other people that will do the opposite, and they will worship God when things are good. When things are bad, they become objectors, right? And so God says, both of these situations are very bad, and we should try to stay away from it, right? And it's not something that obviously is something that is easy for human beings. I mean, we have flaws, and we tend to get excited when things are good, and we tend to object when things are bad, tend to fall into despair when things are bad, and so that's why we have all of these admissions tests that are very thorough and detailed to test us to these things. And even when we pass these tests, we still have to go through our purification process, because we may have proven that generally speaking, we are going to worship God in all circumstances. But in a lot of situations, we still may not act in the most favorable ways. And so God wants to fix all those situations, all those minor flaws in us. We'll still go through things here and there as part of the polishing process, because, you know, as the message of the covenant says, we want to be purified as, polished as a diamond, as perfect human beings. And this whole life is designed as such. It's also a test, but at the same time, it's also a learning experience. It's also a polishing process. It's also a school where we're learning things. I mean, we're not just getting tested; we're also learning and getting tested and learning to get better. Just like a regular school, and or a rehabilitation facility, you would say, so that we can, go back to God and be redeemed. So, and the messenger of the covenant gave a good example. It's like when you're in school, and he said that you're not performing well in certain subjects. Like, and let's say you're studying something, and there's a lot of mathematics in there, and you seem to be flunking it, right? So then the school will send you back to say, go and take calculus 1 or calculus 2, and he gives that example, and schools will do that in the same way, kind of like, we're going through that whole process, and in the same way, like, we will, our life is designed accordingly. uh, so it's a good comparison overall. And then, God willing, I'll continue reading. It says, um, when we sorry, so verse 37, do they not realize that God increases the provision for whomever he wills, or reduces it? These should be lessons for people who believe. Therefore, you shall give the relatives their rightful share of charity, um, as well as the poor and the traveling alien. This is better for those who sincerely seek God's pleasure. These are the winners. So understand that, God has given us an exact measure of how much we're supposed to get in this world. No matter what we do in this life, we're not going to get anything more or less than what we're supposed to get. So people who get worked up about money, need to know this, that or people who are just constantly running after money need to understand that people who are like constantly killing people for money or cheating people for money, they know that, okay, God has given you a specific share in your life, and whether it's, or people who are cheating other people, as I already said, like in business and stuff. So we know that, you cannot take any more or less than what God has already prescribed for you. So it's up to you if you want to do it in the righteous way, or you want to do it in the unrighteous way. Obviously, it's a test. If you want to do it in the unrighteous way, God will open doors for you to do it in the unrighteous way, because that's what you want, right? God says He will even encourage people. You see people, all these con artists and stuff. Things just come to them, right? Like, say someone is a person, killer for hire. Customers will go to them, in accordance with God's will. New people will see, people who want to kill other people will be driven to find these people, right? Will be encouraged to do business with people that are corrupt. People who want to do corruption will find people to be corrupt with, will find people to scheme with. In the same way, people who want to do righteous works, they'll find God will show them doors and ways wish they can be righteous. Obviously, God doesn't do anything bad, and God doesn't want people to go to hell, but the people themselves want to go to hell. So everything is in accordance with God's will and His system. God gives us enough rope for us to hang ourselves if that's what we want to do, because this whole test is designed to expose, if we are going to be with God or not. So in the same manner, um, God is reminding us that, look, the provisions are coming from God, and it cannot be more or less. So you should be charitable, you shall be righteous, you shall be honest, and you shall give, especially to the poor, the traveling alien, the relatives, the rightful share. So this is very important reminder for us. When we see people in need, we should tell ourselves really that yes, it is their task, it is their situation that they're going to, but at the same time, it's not just what they're going through, it's what you're being put into as well, because it's a test for you to see how you would respond to that situation. Right? A lot of people will respond well, a lot of people will respond poorly, based on whatever their belief is, right? A lot of people respond poorly, and we know that it's unfortunate for those people that will think, for example, like, say, someone is asking for money, and then you get suspicious he's doing drugs, he wants to drink alcohol, or find things like that, right? But then obviously, a person who just wants to give to charity for God's pleasure, who doesn't care whether this person uses it for drinking or he uses it for whatever. I mean, as long as you're giving your charity, you're giving it for your own soul, you're giving it for your post-retirement account. Your goal is not to help the other person, your goal is to help yourself, right? And that's the entire idea, is you're doing it for God, not for the person. If someone needs money and you're giving the money to the person just because you feel bad for the person, I mean, that's still good, that you, at least you're not selfish, right? But you're not doing it, still not doing it for the right reasons. Everything we do, I mean, we have to have the right intentions in place, right? Even if you're going to work, you should have the intention that I'll make money so I can spend in the cause of God, I can strive. So it's counted as your worship. Um, and so that's why it's better for those who sincerely seek God's, to seek God's pleasure. Your goal is nothing else. God says these are the words. Verse 39, the usury that is practiced to increase some people's wealth does not gain anything with God. But if you give to charity, seeking God's pleasure, these are the ones who receive their reward manifold. So just so this shows to us that wow, this shows to us. I was just going to, I think I should speed up. So this shows to us that the usury that is practiced by people to increase their wealth does not gain anything in God. I mean, people love usury, right? In this society that we live in, today's world in general, people love to make uh, more money and victimize those whose money they're using, and indebt people for as long as they can, as much as they can. They find ways and means in which they can exploit people. But God says, giving to charity is better. If you really want to increase your wealth, give to charity, and there's nothing better than giving to charity. I mean, because the return on investment that you're going to get, the how it's going to multiply for you the hereafter, there's no comparison to that. But if you're going to do usury, I mean, you're going to end up a loser, because there's an expected war with God. And just as a clarification here, usury is excessive interest. So interest like 15 to 20%, where, as the Messenger of the Covenant says in one of the footnotes, where no one is victimized and all parties are happy and benefiting. It's a win-win for both parties. That's fine. But when it becomes illegal and prohibited, uh, illegal in terms of submission, and prohibited in terms of submission, is when you start to exploit the other person. You see someone, let's say, with bad credit, or someone with a really pressing need, and you decide to raise the interest level for them, because you can, because you know that no one else will give them, and then you say, well, you're more risky So I have to charge 30% or 40%, you know? I mean, this is ridiculous. And then so their loans get multiplied many times over, and doesn't help the people, right? It just makes things worse. It doesn't help the society. It keeps people poor. You know, the rich people get richer, and the poor people get poorer as a result of that, right? And we see that as a very common practice, and we see how even economies get hurt as a result of it. Entire countries, you know, their economies are destroyed as a result of this sort of greediness. You know, the markets collapse, housing collapses, you know, so many things happen, and you know, just causes destruction, and people lose their jobs, and so much stuff happens, right? It's just that's why, you know, God prohibits usury, and He recommends people to have social circulation of wealth through charity, um, and you know, this is the God says, you know, this is the right path. Verse 40, who's worthy of worship? God is the one who created you. He's the one who puts you, he's the one who provides for you. He's the one who puts you to death. He's the one who resurrects you. Can any of your idols do any of these things? Be he glorified. He's much too exalted to have any partners. Disasters have spread throughout the land and the sea because of what the people have committed. He thus lets them taste the consequences of some of their works, that they may return to the right works. Learning from history, say, roam the earth and know the consequence for those before you. Most of them were idol worshippers. Therefore, you shall devote yourself completely to this perfect religion before day comes, which is made inevitable by God. On that day, they will be shocked. Whoever disbelieves, disbelieves to his own disbelieves to the detriment of his own soul, while those who lead a righteous life do so to strengthen and develop their own souls. For he will generously recompense those who believe and lead a righteous life from his bounties. He does not love the disbelievers. Among his proofs is that he sends the winds with good omen to shower you with his mercy and to allow the ships to run in the sea in accordance with his rules, and for you to seek his bounties through commerce, that you may be appreciative. So we see that God says, you know, God doesn't. We should devote ourselves obviously to the perfect religion, and we see the consequences of what the people have done and how disasters have already spread in the land and the sea, as we see around the world from the corruption that people do as a consequences of things that they do, right? These examples everywhere, and and we're told that, you know, God is the only one who's worthy of worship. You know, these people are worshiping different idols, and that's why idol worship is the mother of all evil. And you see corruption and destruction and chaos all over the world just because people are idol worshippers. You know, if there was no idol worship, nobody would worship Satan. The earth would be a perfect place for every human being. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But you know, that's the reason why earth is full of problems. People are in poverty, they don't know who they are, they don't know why they're here, and all that. They're worshiping their egos, they're worshiping the statues, they're worshiping other people, and you know, the world is in chaos, as we know, right? We're living in Satan's dominion, and we see everywhere idol worship around us. Everywhere you look, there's idol worship, idol worship. You know, there's you rarely find people who worship God alone sincerely. And God says, learn from history. You know, people who did that in the past didn't succeed, and we see that's why, you know, they get what they get. And God says, you know, devote your religion absolutely to God alone. This is the perfect religion, and if you don't, I mean, you're just you know, hurting your own soul. Obviously, they can't hurt God, and God eventually will um, recompense the believers. You know, so yeah, following the right path may not be you know, the easiest path, you know, looking at the outset, but it's the path where you make effort on yourself, and it's a path that pays. The real path that is difficult, but it's the path that really pays off. It's the path, the intelligent path that we want to be on if we want to. You know, it's a no-brainer for us, right? And God says his proofs is that he sends us the winds, showers to shower us with mercy. We see the ships run through the earth. You know, water, we all understand, has specific properties that make, you know, things float. On top of it, you can't have the same with other every liquid, right? You have a surface tension on the water that causes things to float, and water has some very specific properties that not every liquid even will have, and so God allows that to be the case specifically because He wants us to enjoy all of these things that we can be appreciative of God. That says that you may be appreciative, right? So we should learn to remember to appreciate is very important, and we do appreciation not just to service but to our actions. Guaranteed victory for the believers, verse 47. We have sent messengers before you to their people with profound signs, subsequently be punished those who transgress. It is our duty that we grant victory to the believers. God is the one who sends the winds to stir up the clouds to be spread throughout the sky in accordance with His will. He then piles the clouds up. Then you see the rain coming down from. When it falls on whomever He chooses from among His servants, they rejoice. Before it fell on them, they resorted to despair. So God says that He has sent the messengers before the people with profound signs, and people who didn't believe, they were punished. Ultimately, God grants guaranteed victory to the believers, right? So the victory is guaranteed from the believers. It's not like a chance thing that maybe you will get victory, maybe you won't. God's guarantee that the believers will always be victorious. And just a quick note about verse 48. When I first read it, mashallah, like it definitely, I mean, it struck me immediately that the stages in which the cloud that are rain forming clouds, like this description of the stages and how those clouds are formed is exactly in accordance with how science today describes them and how God has described them here. And I remember that because I had studied about that in school, and I saw the direct correlation, mashallah, that God has put here. There's no nonsense in the Quran, and this is another proof from God that this Quran is only authored by God. And God says, before it fell on them, they had resorted to despair. So we should never despair of God's mercy. God shows us His continuous mercy every single day, and He's in full control. So we must never ever despair of God's mercy, no matter how grim the situation looks, how hopeless the situation may seem. We should never be hopeless, and should always uh, implore God and expect the best outcome based on our full trust in God. So with this, God willing, I'll end. And if you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you.
Subhanallah. God bless you, brother. Thank you.
Okay. God bless you.
MashaAllah, brother. MashaAllah.
So, if anybody has any comments or questions, please feel free.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. I have a question about brother. So, 30,
Question about
30,
brother?
no. Okay,
Oh,
question all of you. So, yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So, 30, 32. So, in the last part, so each party rejoicing with what they have. So, so that means, like the traditional Muslim, so they have so many religious sects. So everyone is happy with what they have, right? So in the in submission, say I say, we we are following, we follow Quran alone and God alone, and someone come, with us, join us, and we don't know actually, all this his or her background. Say he like support the circumcision or something else. We don't know. So in the beginning, he said he is a submitter. So it's like after 3 4 months, 5 months, if you realize that, oh, now he is going to he support the circumcision. So what you say? Oh, don't pray with us, or what to do that? It's example. This is hypothetical example. So if we said no, no, don't pray with us. Should I am going to like divide the religion or what? So in that means.
Yeah, so Masha, we have example from the messenger of the covenant, right? So with his father, he gives the example, for example, his father was a traditional Muslim, right? He gave him the message for 4 months, right? And then after 4 months, he realized that there was no hope for his father. One day, his father told him that, I'm not going to enter this masjid unless you put Muhammad's name there, right? And so the messenger of the covenant told him, he says, because you're an idol worshiper, you're not to step foot in this masjid again, because God says the idol worshippers are filth, right? Now, this may be easy for the messenger. This may be difficult for a lot of humans who are not so strong, right? But nevertheless, he's not wasn't any different than any of us. The fact that he was a messenger doesn't mean that that he was expected to do this and others are expected to do differently. All right. I mean, the thing is that he was going based off of the Quran. That God says idol worshippers are not to frequent God's masjids while confessing their disbelief. So it's one thing, for example, when a person doesn't know and they're just or you don't know, right? And they're coming and you're welcoming or you're giving them a chance to see if they may change their understanding. But once you realize that this person's mind is made up and there's no hope for that person, either two things are going to happen, right? Either that person himself is going to feel unwelcome and he's going to leave, or you're going to tell him that he's not welcome here. Because if a person's an idol worshiper, what makes him an idol worshiper is he's following other sources besides Quran, right? So it's the same for me if I want to allow him to come, or if I want to allow any other traditional Muslim to come who also believes in circumcision and a bunch of other things, right? But it's not based on how many things they're doing wrong. It's based on what they're doing. If they're committing idol worship by clearly bringing new practice into the religion or following other sources besides Quran, they're not a submitter. And so we cannot have one standard for certain group of people and another standard for another, and we have to be consistent, right? So in those situations, really, it's the test for the people, and everybody will do according to what is supposed to be done. So either the person who is coming will eventually leave anyways, because that also is God's principle, right? It's also the principle that the hypocrites eventually they will drop out. And this is also another example where the messenger of the covenant is talking about certain hypocrites that were coming and then they stopped coming, and he said, we didn't do anything, we didn't say anything, and they just left on their own, right? And we have seen those examples too. People come and sometimes people just leave on their own, and sometimes people come and you just have to tell them you're not welcome. And it might be tough, it might be difficult, You might have people pointing fingers at you and saying you're a divider and this and that, you know. But at the end of the day, you're not answerable to other people. You're answerable for yourself for what you did, you know, what you're required to do from God, you know. So you just have to judge the situation based on your circumstances, based on your knowledge of the person that you know. If you know this person is an idol worshiper and you know that this person is not going to change his mind, then you don't have to worry about anything. You know, whether he comes or he doesn't, you know, it's not going to affect you if he doesn't come, in other words, right? So don't feel like, oh, I can't tell him not to be here. Like, what if he changes his mind tomorrow? Then I'll be responsible, you know?
Yeah, that's the same thing. I was
Yeah,
thinking always, maybe
yeah.
I think, oh, maybe after 6 months, maybe this person will will change.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah.
the thing is, it has to be based on what you know, what
Okay,
you're,
okay,
what
understood.
you,
Yeah.
I mean, if you are convinced 100% today that this person is showing no signs of any change, you see this person is destined for hell. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's no doubt in your mind that this person will never change. You know,
Okay.
some people will kind of try to even avoid that situation, say, "Oh, I don't know." Like, even if the person says they'll never change, or even if the person's showing no signs, you know, some
Mm-hmm.
people will want to close their eyes and just look the other way, pretending that they don't know, or they'll just say, "Oh, well, anybody can change." You know, well, anybody can change, but not anybody will change. And you have to make that decision, right? When God says, do not befriend people who are hopeless in this life, you have to judge if a person has hope or not based on your knowledge, right? If you do it to the best of your ability based on your knowledge of this person, not based on your likes and dislikes, not because
Mm-hmm.
this person has a, an irritating personality, or this person comes from a country which you don't like, or something like that, or anything. It's based on your knowledge, 100%, based on your knowledge of this person's faith, that you
Mm-hmm.
think that how adamant this person is about not changing. You know, if
Mm-hmm.
I see someone that when I talk to them, let's say, you know, about a certain topic, you know, I can gauge how open-minded they are. You know, I can gauge whether they can, you know, like, let's say if you show somebody the mathematical miracle, right, and you go through, it's one thing like you're trying to talk to them and they're distracted or something, right? But you say, well, maybe they're distracted. Maybe I'll find a better time, you know. But if you show somebody the whole mathematical miracle, let's say, just say, right? You show somebody the mathematical miracle from start to finish, in where there's no disturbance or anything, and so they went through all the miracle, they went through all the teachings, they went through all the verses of the Quran. They have full knowledge of everything, right? Let's say there's a topic, let's say you brought circumcision in this, right? Somebody, and so now you have explained to them why it's not part of the religion. You've explained to them multiple times. You have shown them all the proofs, and they're saying no. You know, you're creating a new religion, or blah blah blah, things like that. You know, then where is the hope, right? The hope would be like, if there's things that there's a disconnect, there's things I haven't showed to this person. Maybe this person is under some sort of a like a influence that he doesn't know, that you have some different many different uh, factors, right, based on which you can judge individually for each case, right? There's no single cookie cutter solution for every person too, right? It's based on that very specific person. Every person is different, and in your situation you would know exactly, you would be the right person to make the decision. Now, we're humans, okay? We may make mistakes, but it would be based on your intention and based on your knowledge of that person. If you make a mistake, like in some way, like you have no way of knowing, tomorrow they just snap out of it themselves, after maybe 10 years. That's not your fault. I mean, you couldn't see that coming in 10 years, but that doesn't mean that you just say, no, he can change, anybody can change. That person changed 10 years. Some people do, right? Some people do change, but you can't use that rare example and say, well, anybody can change. But we don't know everybody's circumstance. Everybody's circumstance is different. But based on, again, our analysis of the person or situation, if you see no hope in your heart, this person will ever change. So that's it.
Mm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mashallah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Mashallah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
Mhm.
Right.
MashaAllah. Thank you.
Mhm.
So I have also off topic question. Can I ask now or
Sure.
later?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So for example, like I am from like I born in from Bangladesh. So what I observe, from like 15 years, there is some kind of dictatorship or like violence of like uh, no human rights, freedoms, restriction of you know uh, hu- um, uh, freedom of speech, democracy, so many things, a lot of
Mhm.
corruption, going on.
Mhm.
So we know that God is in control, and I know that most of our countries people, like as a the traditional Muslim, but so most of the people are idol worship.
Mhm.
So because of the consequence, that's why they have the like the this kind of dictatorship. And when they say they are doing so many things wrong, so sometimes I condemn these things, and I also protest with the other people. So because it's hurting
Mhm.
sometimes, because we when you see something is so bad, and you
Mhm.
in your own eyes. So as a
Mhm.
submitter, so we know that God is controlling, but we
Mhm.
have to condemn, right? But even though I am going the other people,
Mhm.
even they are not submitted, so
Mhm.
I am going with them. So I'm thinking,
Mhm.
do I am I doing wrong, or
No,
is
of course not. What you're doing is fine because you're just from what you're describing, it's just you're advocating righteousness, right? And you're forbidding, you know, transgress. I mean, evil, right? You're forbidding evil, advocating righteousness. So
Mhm.
advocating for equal treatment of people, whether they're poor or rich, and no corruption. This is fine. Like the messenger Shuaib, like when he went to people, he said, be honest, don't do corruption. These are part of God's laws. So
Mhm.
you, excuse me. So you're telling people they should be righteous,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Okay.
So
Mhm.
that's totally fine. I mean, and God says the believers, I mean, they also stand up for their own rights, and
Mhm.
then if other people need their help, if they're being oppressed, I mean, you can help them too,
Yeah, yeah,
if you
yeah.
want. So you're not committing anything wrong. But just I would also say in these situations to avoid like siding with like a certain party or something, like because all these a lot of these because you don't want to get sucked into politics either, right? You want to
Yeah,
keep it to the level of submission, like
yeah, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
yeah.
not supporting,
Hmm.
any parties, because
Hmm.
there are some
Yeah.
parties are, it's not,
Hmm. They're all corrupt.
political. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They are all corrupt,
Hmm.
yeah. So
Yeah.
also, yeah, also, so many people are not belong to parties, but so they are also,
Hmm.
protesting, so this kind of thing,
Hmm.
when there is so many mass killing happen, so many,
Hmm.
so people, come to the streets, something like that, yeah.
Hmm.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, even the Messenger of the Covenant was. I saw one of the audios where they were also talking about joining the army, and he was saying like, like what should we do? Like can we join the army? You know, and he said, yeah, you can join the army. It's just like a job. You know, it's like, but yeah, it says if they draft you to war, I mean, you don't have to go to war. You know, but you can join the army. And but nowadays, I mean, it's hard to join the army without not participating in the actual wars because there's so many conflicts going on around the world.
And another things, my so so always, we know that when people are doing so many corruption and so many, like, so people are, one person, the most like the, like say the president of the prime minister will be the main responsible, when there is a mass killing going on. So people always looking for to get like the get retribution, like humiliation for that person. So, but it's not happening, So, like 10 years, 15 years, you know. So,
Hmm.
so what is the reason behind that? Like.
The reason is that God says that everybody's time is predetermined. You know, some people are given more time to confirm their sinfulness and do their things. Other people are annihilated. You know, so this is God's system, right? Everybody has a predetermined time, and
Mm,
once their time is up, that's it. But we can't advance it or delay it. You know, maybe the politician could be, for example, you know, many you could be have certain politicians that may be younger, or you could have, you know, certain politicians that that maybe have to do certain really sinful acts, you know, that have to happen, you know, based on what the people deserve. It could be so many factors, right? Yeah. If the entire country is corrupt, you know, and
mhm.
then, you know, it has to be like, you know, let's say, you know, they have to do more corruption to show who they really are, and, you know, just hurt more people, and more people will die under the age of 40, you know, go to heaven. It could be so many things, right?
Oh yeah, that's also I was thinking. Because the entire
Mm-hmm.
country's got, both side
Mm-hmm.
politician,
Mm-hmm.
So recently, like 300, more than 300 people dies. Young people, most of the
Mm-hmm.
children, like below 40.
Yeah, like in
Like
Bangladesh, I
only
was
five, six, within
recently,
five,
right?
6 days, 300, more than 400.
People
It's
died,
not,
yeah.
we are not sure because they are hiding so many things,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what God says. You know, disasters have spread based on what the people have committed. The disasters have spread to the land and the sea, even in the sea, right?
Mm.
And verse 29 says, indeed, the transgressors have followed their own opinions without knowledge. Who then can guide those who have been sent astray by God? I mean, how can you even debate with a person who's following his own opinion, right? I mean, if someone has agreed to follow a scripture, let's say the Quran, you know, you may be able to debate with that person and show them the verse from Quran, and you guys can maybe correct him. Who decides to follow his own personal opinion? I mean, there's no way you can guide him back, right? Because there's you can't even come to a mutual ground at that point for someone who decides to just go along with his own ideas. And I think, like for example, the Quran alone, the Quranists, people are an example of that, where they say they follow Quran alone, but then they follow their own opinions, uh, and don't follow the Quran alone. And you know, they you just see them going farther and farther astray, and they don't accept you know messengers, even though God has put the messengers names in the in the Quran, the Messenger of the Covenant is mentioned by name. They don't want to accept, and they have lost their prayers, they have lost their Hajj, they have lost so many practices, and they're just going further. Having women lead the prayer. They have like gay imams, and God knows what else is coming in the future. They've completely destroyed themselves and just giving Quran a bad name, basically. And that when you try to introduce submission to traditional Muslims, they're like, oh yeah, you're a Quranist. Any other comments or questions from anyone? Okay, so if no comments, God willing, we can conclude our study. Thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
God bless you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Good
Assalamu
study.
alaikum. Thank you. Assalamu
Assalamu alaikum. God bless you all.
alaikum.